My name is I am representing tranzit.sk, which is a space for contemporary art in Bratislava. It is situated close to the railway station at the intersection of Peštica and Karpatka Street. And in our program, we focus on experimental exhibition making, critical discourses, and also interdisciplinary approach. And this event today, this lecture, is the sixth in the series of relating art, architecture, and urbanism, and also relating to the heritage of modernism in post-socialist countries. And in this respect, we collaborated this time with Peter Salary and the Department of Architecture of Slovak Academy of Sciences. And we together invited Oleksandr Burlaka from Kiev, who is an artist and architect and also researcher. And I would like Peter to introduce Oleksandr.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I don't want to speak a lot because I think Oleksandr will speak about his project and artistic point of view. I just want to emphasize that he is educated as an architect in Kiev, but recently is more concentrated or working in art sphere and in research of architecture. And I think maybe on the first view it should look like a really concentration to the history or to the history of the 20th century architecture and this now somehow fashionable socialist modernism or East modernism. But in general it is researching our contemporary state of the architecture and society, which is, I think, which has a lot of common not only with Slovakia or the countries in the Eastern Bloc, but also with the whole global situation in the, let's say, neoliberal capitalism, which is. So I give a word to Oleksandr and thank you.
Thank you for inviting. I wanted to say in the beginning that I was studying architecture in Kiev, at my hometown, in the Architecture and Construction University, and I was started working while being in the third grade already, and next 8 years I was working in the small construction and architectural designing company, and it was just before the financial crisis, so we were designing a lot of commercial and housing facilities, and then nothing was built. And the next years after 2008 we were building only, but the private houses for cash, and it was just totally another practice for me. And already while working in the architectural company, together with my colleagues, we started to make our own projects apart from the official work, and somehow we presented them. We started to present them on some competitions and some shows in the form of books, and these books were invited to take part in some exhibitions, and after some artists began to ask to collaborate, and that's how I was slipped to this art sphere, and but then I went freelance, so now I'm working mostly as an exhibition designer and as an artist, but I still doesn't feel secure in this art field, and mostly concentrating on the architectural issues, also because I know this language and this formal language, and also because architecture is very illustrative about the situation in the society and its history. So while saying that, I should show you this small, oh sorry. Yeah, somehow it is not playing this way. Yeah, so it was our, yeah, sorry for that, but it was our way to deal with the situation while working on the designing the big offices. We were interested in filming this vernacular architecture, like very DIY structures made by local people to make the landscaping more friendly to go through. For example, in that case, it was just a tube out of the concrete wall. Here is the project we did together with my colleague Ivan Melnichuk a few years ago. It's a film about the Palace of Culture in Svaljava. It is a small town in Transcarpathia, and it is almost a village, but there was a huge wood factory, wood and furniture making factory, and there were almost 5,000 people working in there. So going through it looked like a Austro-Hungarian small town with men drinking coffee on the street, but later we found out this huge ruin of some socialist infrastructure, and nobody could say anything about that. So we went into the nearby administration saying that we want to make a movie, the documentary about the building, just to take a permission, to have a permission to go there, but we didn't want to make a movie realistically, but in the end we did it. And it is from the beginning we understood that it is a very strange structure, because according to the scale of this town, it shouldn't be there, because it is bigger than the capacity of its population. But in reality it was some kind of visualization of the grey economy in the Soviet Union, because the local factory was too expensive, so it did design the cultural palace for its needs out of the system of the socialist planning. So it was twice more expensive than it had to be. And and actually the director of this woodworking factory, he was trained as an architect in Prague, and then found himself as the director of this factory after the war in Soviet Union, and he had 3 sons. 2 of them were architects, and one of them became an architect of the building. So it was really, and he had a lot of other sons, and they were also working outside of the family, and they were all not official, like children who were also working in the factory, and the whole situation was a kind of medieval situation with the landlord and his relatives and family ruling this very local situation. So during this research we found out that this medieval society structure was still incorporated in the socialist economy and took its form through this culture, palace of culture. And another strange thing is that now it is a ruin, and it is a visualization of 90s when the factory collapsed. And the story is that people who were going there to take part in different choirs and activities, they came back and took everything away. So all it was ruined by local people who were constructing it 10 years before. So they came back when the factory collapsed. They didn't have work, they didn't have money, and take back all the materials. And also this is the pictures from the installation with showing the range of different decorative materials used in the interior, which is showing like 18 different kinds of stone from different parts of Soviet Union they were buying. This is also the latest project. I'm just showing you in this part the overview of latest projects, just to show like the themes that I'm interested in through the practice. It is the exposition in the space of the Zhitny market, a huge market structure with a long span concrete shell covering from the beginning of 80s, and it was part of the exhibition which became possible because of the renovation of the market, and one of the floors became empty, and we together with Oleksandr Burlaka, my colleague, we did a small exhibition about the history of the project with the markets in the Soviet Union and in Kyiv. Because there was a huge movement of urbanization beginning from the 60s, and the cities were becoming so huge that they needed more markets, and it was really the project led by engineers who designed the alphabet of different forms for concrete shells covering different geometrical forms and different spaces. and then architects could use this typology and use already existing structural scheme to design the market. And almost 50 markets were designed according to this plan. And we were showing it in the form of the market stands, where these market projects could be regarded as an objects you can buy, because all of them now also in this stage when they will become a selling product. Here is the exhibition about the unrealized projects in Kyiv from 60 to 80, and it was shown in the form of in the form of the drawing office in the state projection institute, state designing institute. There were really a lot of quite experimental projects, and it was interesting how architects were working in the situation when from time to time they didn't have any finances to build anything, or the ideological course was changing, and they were not dealing, from time to time they were not dealing with the client, they were just designing according to their imagination or principles, and it is quite a unique situation. And the Soviet Union didn't have such monolithic structure. The history was changing, and the context was changing from 50s to 80s quite drastically, and it's interesting how architecture was showing it. Here is the Kyivproject project from 2011, and it was like the first time when we, together with Ivan Menichuk, then the group of Predmety group, we did kind of mapping of the post-war neo-modernist architecture in Kyiv as one whole piece or one space. Here we have the photo from 70s and today's situation, and you can see that we are really living in the same structure, but in another economical situation, and it is kind of parasiting on this old infrastructure, and then we really felt this need to show another possibility for space, and that behind this layer there is more like a logical scheme, and of course there is a problem with all this neo-modernist layer, because now we have almost 50 years from its construction, and if you know, I can make this short historical quote, short historical expert. Everything started from 1955 when Khrushchev, 55-56, when Khrushchev did the law on elimination of excesses in architecture, and he stopped this Stalinist eclectic, very decorative style, and turned it into very functionalist way in order to make it more economical. And he was also competing the US in, but the architects they were not ready for that change, and they really lost all their formal language, and in the beginning all the projects they just lost their decorative elements and were constructed without. But then some traces to the constructivist ways of design were found, or mostly they were trying to design as it was in the pictures of the foreign magazines. So this way they went closer to the international movement, and here we are showing all this big project from that time, mostly civil buildings, as a one road, as a one space, showing that it is visible, to visualize it, because for Ukrainian society mostly the architecture of 19th century is valuable, and everything is not visible. So it's also the problem what to do with this modernist legacy, because for example, when in 1974 Cedric Price from Archigram was asked what to do with the York Minster Cathedral tower, which was collapsing, he said, flatten it, because we should change architecture as the worn out pair of shoes. And what to do with the modernist architecture when it is worn out? Of course, maybe it should go to the collective memory and give the place to something new. But what if we were thinking, what if it is not even in the collective memory yet? So we were trying to put it, and we had a small budget for some public works, and did a renovation of a few pavilions according to their new functions, or the situation of lost function. So, for example, here it was the Lenin alley with this with this form, yeah, and it was the viewing point. But after 30 years, the trees grown, that it became very intimate space, and we did some modernization of this pavilion. For mostly it is used by people with dogs or some school children hiding to smoke. And this one, it is the entrance pavilion to the botanical garden. there is a pair of two round this round canopies with the cash desks inside. It was designed in '65, but the last 30 years it was standing painted gray, and the cash desk and other kiosks were hiding under this roof, but not inside the legs. So we did the demolition of the kiosk just to have the sunshade function here, and did the renovation of the water tubes system, because it was stuck and the rain was pouring it and the water was coming from the sides. And also we did only one and left another one, thinking that we will be invited by the Botanical Garden administration to renovate it later from another budget, but they did not. It was just more two brothers, but in different stage. But during the last time they did some renovation, the same kind of renovation, another one, and this one, it was the cash desk in another recreational territory, Hydro Park, nearby the beaches. So we did emphasize this horizontality to make it more like a Elisitsky horizontal skyscraper form, thinking that architects at that time were having this reference in their mind. But interesting thing that when we came here to paint the window over, because it lost the function, it appeared that inside there are illegal workers sleeping, and the space inside is full of beds, and they were quite happy because they had more intimacy after this painting. I was passing by a few days ago and found out that they painted red everything. And we also did this a lot of maps which we were putting at the pavilions, at these 3 pavilions, with another 50 objects inside. But the most interesting thing during this project was that we understood that having that small budget, we could destroy them. Actually, coming to the botanical garden, we realized that we can demolish the pavilion, so we could do everything. They are for every situation, just to change it. They just don't have money for that. So it could be also maybe a better project if we could demolish these structures and imagine what it is showing. It is showing that everybody can do with the city if you have money enough. And another project is also touching that theme. It is called An Island. It is about an island in the center of the city. It was a village there, but during the war it was burned down, and after the war it was, according to this Siam principles, it became a recreational green and sport zone. 60s. The city now it is growing in all directions, and it's like and it's like here and here it is really unregulated area, and we thought that here is the last good place for some oligarch to design his residency, and we used as a reference the former president Hacienda Mežegiria, which was like 15 hectares big, and actually it is a kind of a new architectural typologies. This extra living space with the very secured territory and different functional zones like in Rome or in Baroque time. And actually, when Yanukovych territory was opened, when he left, I was quite surprised because in the center there was this wooden house, and I expected more from him. Actually, there was some Greek ruin part here, but and everything was very huge, but it was not very extravagant. So we were doing actually this project 1 year before, and we used this island site, and in the beginning we designed a figure of an architect, a figure of a fictitious architect who is. We use different photos from different family photos, and he should be a Soviet modernist who were designing the mass housing, and then he had the hungry 90s without any construction, and now he finds the best client, and here is the reference also for this project, because here is the Institute of Information in Kyiv, and here we are putting the image of the project of the biggest Orthodox Christian cathedral in Europe, which is being built there, and it could be the same architect, but later, because it is very illustrative situation when architects changed their formal language according to the economical term, and but functionally it is the same, because this Orthodox cathedral, it is the very complex system of parking lots, hotels, and different facilities designed in the same way. So our architect uses the avant-gardist architectural language because it is more fashionable, and we did this model with 3D printed objects, and here is the letter to the client in a very Medici manner, and the project materials. But actually, we did this together with Ivan Melnichuk in 2013. But actually, now this situation is not illustrative, because I will show in the last project. Now it is the situation when the client the investor, the developer, he itself sees himself as an architect, and he doesn't need an architect. They are more like Hollywood producers, and they are producing the development, telling the architect what should be there, even what like style or what reference should be used. Here I wanted to show the project with which I'm working now, and it is the research on the balconies. Actually, I was preparing this presentation on the balcony, and behind me there were 11 meters of 1 meter wide, full of I don't know, everything which I don't need in my flat, and like bikes and children carriages and bath and everything you can imagine. And outside of the house, my building, which is 16 floors high, everything is kind of patchwork of the balconies, and every is unique because each inhabitant make it for themselves. And mine was done by my father, and in the apartment where I was born, it was also done by my parents. And when I was asked to do a photo book on the balconies, I was thinking how they established, when did they appear, and I was asking a lot of urbanists and historians and Soviet architectural specialists, and nobody knows when, because it is the sphere out of the normal research. And I was searching through the magazines and the archive photos, and found out that this typology of a glazed balcony, it is really, of course, it is the ancient architectural form, very political, because the balcony is the place for political statements and Vatican Pope appearance and so on. Stalin and Hitler, everybody were making 45 minutes past, making their statements on the balcony, but I think that the last 50 years it is the time of the new architectural form establishing the glazed balcony. Maybe this. Also, it was also the result of the Khrushchev 55-56 functionalist term and the competition with the United States. Because they started this mass housing development, but with the motto, economy has to be economical. So the apartments were built even smaller than it was designed often, and and the inhabitants had to find an extra spaces. So all this mass housing was inhabited by people coming from the villages, and they were using what they were doing there normally. So when they were inhabited inhabiting the new flat, they were glazing the balcony and digging the underground storage nearby in the so it was the visualization of the black economy in the Soviet Union, of the bribes, of this grey system which always existed. But then it became, it's mine. It became much more powerful with the collapse of Soviet Union. Also, this functionalist term of Khrushchev, it became real. A lot of glass factories were being built, and in 1958 it was the first Brussels Expo pavilion of Soviet Union, which was the glass cube, and the glass cube became a kind of language of civic center in the Soviet Union. And it was kind of this situation when also Khrushchev proposed in '61 20 years to communism, and later he failed, and Brezhnev came into power. So people felt that there will be no communism, so I should build it in my own apartment out of what I have. And also, what is interesting, that it is a multifunctional space. It is storage. There are a lot of stories with pigs being kept in the balcony, and sometimes it is a barber shop, or later in the patent history in '90s you can find a mushroom, private mushroom factory in the balcony, like official patent how to make a mushroom thing. Or they were in the news in Dnipropetrovsk, the situation when the occupant of the highest floor was using the very big crane to put the water reservoir on the top to his balcony, because he designed it as a water pool. And also in the 90s it became popular to eliminate the wall between the room and the balcony to make it open space. And actually, this last slide, it shows different, Here we can see the situation when an architect was trying to stop people from glazing, making the geometry so complex, but you have seen in the photos that they were much more efficient. And in the end, I wanted to show this Safe Kyiv modernism, this ongoing situation with the Institute of Information in Kyiv. It is known in society as the UFO building, and it consists of office tower, administration part, and the conference hall in the form of 60s, but built only in 1980. Also the plan, the site is very narrow, so the architect he didn't want here is the bus stop, so he didn't want any columns to block the space, and did this flying saucer form. Also, he is a very unique person because he was working in the color theory and built his own system of synesthetic connection between music tones and colors, but not based on subjective vision, but using the experiments. Yes, and he was making the light and music concerts in 50s, and when he was designing this institute, it was his like a guerrilla thing to build this hall as a future light and color theater, when there should be a special instrument which you can play, and different colors will project. After completing this building, he went out. He stopped being architect, and next 15 years he was teaching the color theory, and next 15 years he was making violins by his own technology. Like he's saying that his name is Florian Yuriev. He's saying that Stradivari was genius, but he didn't know structural engineering. And I know, so I can do better. So now we found out the last year that the huge shopping mall construction is going on behind the building, and the only connection to the subway station and the bus is through the building. And the next step, we found out that the investor made a corruptional deal with the Ministry of Education and got 50% of the building in the ownership. And another part of the building should be children scientific center. So later we found out this renderings with the shopping mall eating the flying saucer here, and there were like plans for some restaurant restaurant inside, and it is really a cruelty because there is a wonderful acoustics in that hall, and it led to the group of activists, like almost 1,000 of people were active to protest against it, and the architect of the building, Florian Yuriev, is also active. He has his video blog, and he is the only key to the chance to save the building. Here is the teaser of the movie, of the documentary movie, which we are making, and it will finish the next October, because the opening of the whole complex should be the next October. So here is the 5 minutes teaser. So here is the construction. He said, now I'm in the Institute of Information, I have a meeting here.
Это вот этот, да? Вот этот фонарь. Раньше это был сын Януковича, а теперь кто?
He's asking who is the investor.
Вы сами платите на территории.
And now I'm saying to him that, do you know that there will be entrance to the shopping mall under the flying saucer?
Вы хотели, чтобы я удивился? Я удивился.
He said that yes, I'm intrigued.
Сын Януковича хотел. Слава Богу, они рухнули.
He said that Yanukovych's son, the former president, wanted to grab it.
Чтобы были какие-то свидетели. Раньше был лифт.
Actually, this Institute of Information, it was curated by KGB, so the architect, he was capable to deal with the powers. And here is the meeting with the director of the institute and the architects who are making the renovation. And actually, Florian Yuriev is saying that there should be a committee of activists who will overview the project of renovation. And later there was a big meeting with activists, and in the end, Florian Yuriev is saying that we should save it, and in the end everybody is shouting restoration, not the reconstruction. And he doesn't want to use the microphone even, because he believes in the acoustics of the phone. So here is the investor. Here he is. And after all these events, Florian Yuriev met the investor and proposed and said that I have a dossier on you, and I know that you like to sing. Do you want to sing in my hall together with my violin? And he said, okay, I will give you $1 million, Florian. But it is a very tricky situation, and we will see in half a year how it will finish. I hope there will be a movie, and you will be able to see it, this documentary in 1 year approximately. Please So, and now the situation is like that. The hall is empty, and the chairs are under the UFO. So I will stop now. Thank you for your interest. It's all. So if you will have some questions, we can discuss. Or in informal way after.
Maybe I would like to ask about what you said about this cultural memory of the modernist architecture. That whether not to, or maybe now is the time to destroy it because it's not even subscribed into the cultural memory of the people. But I wonder that what if it is inscribed in the memory, but people doesn't want to have it there, that it is somehow connected with some value system or some history and this kind of thing which people are not comfortable to be something like
Yeah, we have the problem with that, but mostly with the monuments, because we have the so-called decommunization law, and during last years almost 5,000 of Lenin statues and different communist leaders, they were fallen, and first of all it was the unique situation when there were Lenin statue marking the administrative center of every urban formation, and during the war people felt such a despair, so that statues became a very good enemy to canalize it. And also it's good for a state to find, to mark an enemy that the Soviet Union is the reason for everything bad. And maybe it is, but also actually this contemporary bureaucracy, it is the same structure coming from that times. It is the same formation of Soviet system, and a lot of works of art are vandalized now, but architecture is a bit out of this discourse. A lot of people feel proud about their local structures, like swimming halls and the palaces of culture or schools. But of course there is a problem with housing, because housing was made very cheaply, and actually this Khrushchev mass housing from 60s, it was built as a temporary project for 50 years, and now 50 years after, it's impossible. Nobody did anything with that all these years, and now everything is going rusty and needs renovation at the same time. Yes, it is a huge amount. So what to do with that? It is also a problem, because it is a tricky question, because the easiest way is to tear it down and to build a high-rise, which is the most typical situation. But This Khrushchevka districts, they have a very good scale. It is low and full of greenery, and it is good quality of outer space, but bad quality of inside space. Maybe if could be something could be added, like a balcony. It could be because during from the beginning of 2000s the flat space was more and more, was bigger and bigger, but during the last decade it is going smaller and smaller because people have less and less money, and developers, in order to sell something, they are inventing smaller and smaller flats. So now the newest buildings, they have so-called smart flat typology. Do you know smart flat? What is smart flat? It is a way to sell 20-meter flat, which is like the door. Here is bathroom, and here is you will sleep here. It is almost ridiculous thing, and it is even smaller than Khrushchevka. So suddenly Khrushchevkas are more comfortable even. So nobody knows.
And there are some programs to renovate this building, or it's left to the owners?
Or like to revitalize the Yeah, I had the same question, like if there are if there is a need to revitalize the quarters with the...
Actually, the state doesn't have money enough to make the big revitalizing project like in Moscow. There is another, because they have a lot of oil money, they are making the project of demolishing everything and building new and resettling people. And the Ukrainian state, because of the war, also doesn't have, there are a lot of displaced people and so on. There is no any possibility to have this large scale projects. They only can sell some lands to the developers, and developers are developing new housing out of the city, making it sprawling, but inside the city this situation is the same.
And the house
now there is a reform in the with the committees of housekeeping committees, and they are dismantling the Soviet system of state committees, and people themselves should organize, and it is the best way if you have a good house. But if you have a rotten old building with a lot of people, old, having a pension, you cannot form this committee, because you know that next what you will have to do the capital renovation of the whole, and it is impossible. So state wants to give it away, not to have these big projects, but to give it away to people, to not to have this problem.
And I wanted to ask you also about this last project, or more project about this modernism, that you want to, with this book or with this video, only keep the memory of it, or are you trying also kind of protect the building, and how it is with heritage protection of this era? Because in Slovakia, most of us who want to protect are fighting with the heritage board
it went to the Heritage Board, but it is a long story. Maybe it went to the board, but if everything will be good, it will be a heritage, but in the end of the year. But before, they are constructing much more fast. But this movie, it can be an illustration or a motivational thing for people, how this story could be a positive and winning case, or it will show how society is weak and cannot confront the capitalist way of dealing with that.
What about other buildings in Kyiv from this period? They are protected by law, or is it rare?
Some of them are, but it is not systematic. Because actually this board, this heritage board, and also the ICOMOS board of Ukraine, they are concentrated like mostly on 19th century and beginning of 20th century. For them, the constructivist period is the most contemporary possible thing. Also, the Stalinist architecture is quite well listed, because Kreshchatyk, the main street, was built after the war in a posh, eclectic way, and it is heritage. Everybody loves it. And some of the buildings which were listed in Soviet Union, because they were too expensive already in 80s, just to highlight their excellence, they are still listed, like former Lenin Museum or the Ukrainian Palace, the cultural palace. But if you want to have some building listed, it is also a trick, because when it will be much more, nobody will restore it, so state will not fund it, definitely. Yeah, so it is the situation when state is going back and back, and now there is society and developers like playing in the field. And also it is impossible to get in this listing boards, because it's also a very closed company of experts, and they are very snobistic and keeping the border.
So it's difficult to find them to list something.
Yeah. But maybe also the case of UFO with this violent renderings, it was very motivational for people, and it was the very first time when arose a big mass of mostly young people who are not nostalgic, but fed up with this Kyiv style architecture.
So, okay, if you don't have a question, I only want to invite you. Tomorrow will be a bicycle tour or a bicycle tour with discussion in the on the Bratislava modernism, connected to the Ukrainian modernism.
a bicycle tour because I'm here for 2 days almost, and it is the shortest period to make any workshop, and I didn't see anything. I'm first time in Bratislava, and also a bicycle tour for me, it is the most normal practice to see everything, and this is the modernist period which want to have a fit fit human under the sun, in the greenery, going through the infrastructure. So we will be that subject, and also I will tell not about the actual projects, but about the references that I can find, because they are both in the kind of international style. So I will tell you about a lot of other cases with other buildings, and you will tell me what is going on with the actual one.